Hello everyone and welcome back to Beyond the Veil background information. Once again we're doing another creature profile, and this month it's going to be the Strix, which is a creature that terrifies me but plays an important part in the Viper Town stories. There's already in the book Viper in the Shadows there's been mentions of one already, but later on book 8, The Last Rattle, is when there's a really big situation with the Strix, so it's quite important. Anyway, as always, I start with a quote from where one of these creatures appears in my stories. Then I will give you the background information I have, all the species, and then I will actually talk about and give it like a brief species profile to let you know how it is in my universe. Let's get into it then. Within the drawer, Aethon held his brother tucked to his chest. The baby was silent at first, as Aethon could hear the talons of the bird's foot tap upon the ground. He heard in stories that the Strix had a penchant for eating children, and he trembled to think that he and baby Remy were about to be feasted on. The breathing and grunting of the creature as its beak clacked and its skull clicked every time it moved its head filled the air. Aethon could feel its weight upon the ground, aiming towards him and Remy. His body wouldn't stop shivering, and he was fearful it would make the drawer rattle as he pulled his brother close, and then Remy opened his eyes, blinked at his big brother in confusion, and opened his mouth ready to scream. A quote from The Last Rattle. So to start with, I'll let you know that I suffer from Strichiformophobia, a fear of owls. I can tell you that when it comes to the Strix, they're not a comfortable subject for me to think about, if only because they personify the owl demon of my childhood nightmares. But they're certainly an interesting being and come from Greek and Roman sources, mingled later with Eastern European entities, hence Strix and Strigoi are close phonetically. The name is also used for a genus of owls that once included the barn owls, though mistakenly, so their association to owls is prevalent to this day, even if you might not have heard much about them. In most sources, the Strix is referred to as a malevolent being in folklore that brings ill omen when its scream is heard and devours children. Sometimes it is deemed as the transformed guise of a witch. Some sources describe its position in a tree to be hanging, like a bat, meaning a possible confusion for such a creature, and its man-eating behaviour is sometimes linked to a suspicion of blood drinking that plays into Eastern European links to the vampire. Either way, the Strix always appears in the form of a large owl that comes out at sunset to snatch away the unwary or threatened children. Depending on your sources, some say the Strix would produce a strange milk substance it would give to human infants to bring them bad luck or sickness. Birds don't lactate, and we all know that the only white wet substance coming from a bird is uric acid, so those were some very unlucky babies, and no wonder they got sick. The first proper description we get of them comes from Ovid's Fasti, wherein it is described as a large-headed bird with transfixed eyes, rapacious beak, greyish-white wings, and hooked claws. Some, though, describe it as a dark-coloured creature, and of course they are thought to have originated in Greek mythology. That later idea of Strix milk was considered nonsense by Pliny in his Natural History, which says a lot considering some of the items in that piece, but also stated the species of bird holding the name was not easily determined. Though according to later sources, you can avoid your baby getting milked on, or more likely deposited on, by placing garlic as an amulet on the baby. Ovid also refers to the Strix as striges, and states that they will drink the baby's blood, but have also got a nasty habit of disemboweling the child to get to the blood. But even Ovid isn't sure if it's a bird of nature or a transformed witch. The link to witches continues on through later European folklore and medieval descriptions of the being, due to their magical associations and items like feathers being used in love spells. However, John of Damascus wrote that they are able to have corporeal bodies, wearing clothing and also appearing sometimes as spirits. So the more you look into them and the ideas of their cries causing woe, linking them to Banshee, they also brought bad tidings and disease to the family, like the presence of a Strigoi. It's clear to see there are confusions and similarities in roles of this species, and also why you've got the connection of Strix and Strigoi. But I also like the fact that the particular owl I fear, the barn owl, is called Strigat, not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, in Romanian, which means scream and is linked to the feminine name of the vampire. However, if you want to look for a modern link to the Strix, in folklore or at least in urban legends, you can look to two cryptid creatures known as Mothman and Owl Man. Both have descriptions close to these owl-like beings. Both have been said to have terrifying eyes, and scientists debunking these ideas had often reminded people that owls are bigger than you think, and at night their eyes can reflect red. But in linking to the Strix again, the Mothman is a being that not only could have been an ill omen for the collapse of the bridge that came after his wake, but some accounts had it that had it that he seemed to have gone after a local blood donor van, and some of the women who saw it may have been on their period, or there was some odd blood link. As for the Owl Man of Cornwall, it was seen by 2 little girls in a graveyard and was said to certainly have a malevolent air to it. Depictions of it in cartoons and in discussed programs on the beast also link it to being a man-eater and having a hypnotic manner to its eyes. So bearing in mind all of these things and my fear of them, making the villains to vampires because of their similarities and yet their propensity to devour human children was kind of easy. The real trouble was dealing with them like I do with werewolves and shapeshifters, and well, because of that, the romance between a Strix and a vampire in the last rattle had to happen. But fudge. Writing about something that scares you is easy when it's a dark moment. But here's what you need to know about the Strix and the Beyond the Veil universe. Side, dark. Created by owl demons. Created for devouring of children. Created when demonic owls found that their demon abilities to devour and kill mankind could occur, and so they manipulated their half-breed children they produced from humans and veil beings, from witches to shapeshifters, to create a violent owl that would devour children if left alone and vulnerable. Physical description. The human forms vary, with the most predominant features being a large nose and big eyes, but in their predatory form they could take the form of a giant or regular-sized owl. One species per being, but the species can vary, with the barn owl variety being the most common. In this form their eyes are very large and turn red when laying a curse upon others or eyeing up their prey, and their talons are far larger and more easy to manipulate than for regular owls. Some can also take on an in-between form, wherein the body will move disjointedly and the head will keep clicking and jolting to make beings avoid them. Abilities. They can fly, turn into owls obviously, but they are imbued with the ability to knock out the hearing of other veil beings when they screech. When they screech at humans, it can place a curse upon them. Their eyes are also hypnotic, and they can hold their prey still and read their minds. They can also carry a man up in the air and devour them there. Most known for devouring children. Weaknesses. They are not good in sunlight and cannot transform. They are also weak against the fangs of a vampire and a werewolf. They also have an unnatural aversion to garlic and milk, things that are related to old talismans created to fend off their demonic heritage. They are also not as immortal as vampires, and will only live over 100 years unless they devour young blood to rejuvenate themselves. Number unclear. In Europe there are known to be about 3 million, but there are unknown numbers for Africa, South America, Finland and Russia. They were wiped out of mainland Asia, however. Well-known beings. The Owl Man of Cornwall is one that stepped out of the veil and is known within the veil for violence and escaping veil agents. Characters and stories. Cassandra and her family in the Viper Clan series, particularly in the last Rattle Book 8. Final comments. We'll be following on the theme of those night predators that are termed owl, and next time that will be the harpy and siren. But all I can say is that I hate owls and the Strix are scary to me. Thank you for listening.